Hello friends. Quick question before we start. Are you subscribed? If not, you're one of the 80% watching who haven't hit that button yet. These stories take time to research and produce, and your subscription is the best way to support the channel and keep more horror content coming. Leave a like if this story gets under your skin, and comment below. I want to hear what scared you most. Tonight's story was submitted by Sarah from Pennsylvania. She was 14 when this happened back in 2016. She's 28 now, and what she experienced that night changed how she sees trust forever. It's about a babysitting job that should have been routine, but became something far more sinister. Lights off, volume up. Let's begin. I was 14 years old when I got the phone call that would change everything. It was early March 2016, a Friday afternoon after school. I remember because I had just gotten home and dropped my backpack by the door when my cell phone rang. An iPhone 6 with a cracked screen that I was always paranoid about dropping again. The number wasn't saved in my contacts, but it was a local area code. I almost didn't answer, but I was trying to build up my babysitting reputation in the neighborhood. So it picked up on the third ring. Hello? Hi, is this Sarah? The voice was male, somewhere between 35 and 45 if I had to guess. Friendly tone, professional. Not creepy or weird at all. Yes, this is Sarah. Great. My name is David Henderson. I got your number from the community board at the library. You're available for babysitting, right? I felt a little surge of excitement. The library bulletin board was where I'd posted my flyer 2 weeks earlier. Bright pink paper with tear-off tabs at the bottom that had my first name and phone number. My mom had helped me design it. Responsible 14-year-old available for babysitting. References available. CPR certified. That last part was a bit of a stretch. I had watched a CPR training video on YouTube and practiced on a pillow, but I figured that counted. Yes, I am, I said, trying to sound mature and professional. Perfect. My wife and I just moved to Oakmont a few weeks ago. We're still getting settled, but we have a 3-year-old son named Michael, and we're looking for someone reliable for occasional date nights. Would you be available tomorrow night? Saturday? Tomorrow night. I mentally ran through my weekend. No plans except homework and probably watching Netflix in my room. Yes, I can do that. Wonderful. We'd need you from around 6 to probably 11, maybe midnight at the latest. We're going into the city for dinner and a show. Would that work for you? 5 to 6 hours at $10 an hour. That was $50 to $60. More money than I'd made in a single night before. That works perfectly. Excellent. Let me give you our address. I grabbed a pen from the kitchen counter and a piece of junk mail to write on. He gave me an address on Elmwood Drive, which I knew was in the newer development on the north side of town. Nice area. Big houses. My mom drove through there sometimes just to look at the homes. We'll see you tomorrow at 6, he said. And Sarah, thank you so much. We've been having a hard time finding someone we trust since we moved here. No problem, Mr. Henderson. I'll see you tomorrow. After we hung up, I felt good. Proud even. I was building a real babysitting business. This was my 4th family, and if it went well, maybe they'd become regulars. I told my mom about it that night at dinner. She asked the usual questions. Had I met the family before? Did I know anyone who knew them? I explained about the library flyer and the phone call, and she seemed satisfied. She made me promise to text her when I arrived and to call if anything felt off. Trust your instincts, she said. If something doesn't feel right, call me immediately. I don't care what time it is. I rolled my eyes but agreed. My mom was always a little overprotective, but I understood. She watched way too much Dateline NBC. The next day, Saturday, I spent most of the afternoon getting ready. I know that sounds ridiculous for a babysitting job, but I wanted to make a good impression. I wore jeans and a nice sweater. Nothing too casual, but not overdressed either. I packed a small bag with my phone charger, a book in case the kid went to bed early, and some snacks. At 5:45 p.m., my mom dropped me off at the address on Elmwood Drive. The house was exactly what I expected for that neighborhood. 2 stories, light gray siding, white trim, a neat front lawn with a few small bushes. There was a silver SUV in the driveway, something like a Honda or Toyota. Everything looked normal, suburban, safe. Text me when you get inside, my mom said as I unbuckled my seatbelt. I will. And remember, call me if come. If anything feels weird, I know. I will. She waited until I walked up to the front door before pulling away. I heard her car disappear down the street as I rang the doorbell. A few seconds later, the door opened. The man standing there matched the voice from the phone. Mid to late 30s, maybe early 40s. Average height, average build, short brown hair, glasses, wearing a button-down shirt and khakis like he was dressed for a nice dinner. He smiled when he saw me. "You must be Sarah." "Hi, Mr. Henderson. Come on in." He stepped aside and held the door open. I walked into a small entryway with hardwood floors. To the left was a living room with a couch, a TV, and a coffee table. To the right was a staircase leading upstairs. Straight ahead, I could see into a kitchen with white cabinets and stainless steel appliances. Everything looked clean, normal, like a family that had just moved in and was still organizing. "Sorry about the boxes," he said, gesturing to a few cardboard moving boxes stacked against the wall near the stairs. "We're still unpacking. It's been a process." "That's okay. Let me introduce you to Michael." He led me into the living room where a small boy was sitting on the floor playing with a set of wooden blocks. He had light brown hair and was wearing pajamas with dinosaurs on them, even though it was only 6 in the evening. "Michael, this is Sarah. She's going to hang out with you tonight while Mommy and I go out." The boy looked up at me with big, curious eyes, but didn't say anything. "He's a little shy at first," Mr. Henderson said, "but he warms up pretty quickly." I knelt down next to Michael and smiled. "Hi, Michael. I like your blocks. Are you building something?" He nodded and held up one of the blocks. "Tower. That's a really good tower." Mr. Henderson seemed pleased. "Okay, let me show you around real quick." His bedtime is 8:30. He's already had dinner, but there are snacks in the pantry if he gets hungry. Goldfish, fruit pouches, that kind of thing. He usually watches one episode of something on PBS Kids before bed, and then we read him a story. He walked me through the downstairs, showing me where everything was. The kitchen, the bathroom, the pantry. He opened the fridge and pointed out juice boxes and milk. If he has a nightmare or wakes up, just go upstairs and comfort him. His room is the first door on the left. Our bedroom is at the end of the hall, but we won't be here, obviously. Got it. Phone numbers are on the fridge. Mine, my wife's, and the pediatrician, just in case. But honestly, he's a pretty easy kid. You shouldn't have any problems. I noticed he kept saying, "my wife," but I hadn't seen her yet. I figured she was upstairs getting ready. "My wife's finishing up getting ready," he said, as if reading my mind. "She'll be down in a minute." He glanced at his watch. "We should be back by 11, maybe a little earlier if the show gets out early. Help yourself to anything in the kitchen. There's pizza in the freezer if you get hungry." "Okay, thank you." A moment later, a woman's voice called from upstairs. "David, have you seen my black heels? Check the closet." He called back. He smiled apologetically. "She's still trying to figure out where we packed everything." A minute later, a woman came down the stairs. She was probably around the same age as Mr. Henderson, maybe mid-30s. She had blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail and was wearing a dark blue dress. She smiled when she saw me. "You must be Sarah. I'm Jennifer. Nice to meet you. Thank you so much for doing this on short notice. We've been dying to get out of the house since we moved here, but we just haven't had anyone we could trust with Michael." "It's no problem." She walked over to Michael and kissed the top of his head. "Be good for Sarah, okay? Mommy and Daddy will be back later." Michael didn't look up from his blocks. Mr. Henderson grabbed his wallet and keys from the kitchen counter. "All right, we should get going if we want to make our reservation. Sarah, you have our numbers. Call if you need anything." "I will." Mrs. Henderson gave me one last smile. "Thank you again." And then they were gone. The front door closed behind them, and I heard the SUV start up in the driveway and pull away. I stood there in the living room with Michael, who was still stacking blocks, and I felt a weird little flutter in my chest. Not anxiety exactly, just the awareness that I was alone in a stranger's house with their child, and I was responsible for making sure everything went smoothly. But it was fine. I'd done this before. This was just another babysitting job. I sat down on the floor next to Michael. "So, what else do you like to build?" He looked at me and said, very seriously, "Dinosaurs." I smiled. "Do you have toy dinosaurs?" He nodded and pointed to a basket near the couch, filled with plastic dinosaurs. "Can you show me your favorite one?" He stood up, walked over to the basket, and pulled out a green T-Rex. That's a cool one. For the next hour, everything was completely normal. Michael and I played with his dinosaurs. I helped him build the dinosaur city out of his blocks. He was a sweet kid, mostly quiet but smiley when he got excited about something. At one point, he climbed up on the couch and wanted to watch TV. So I turned on PBS Kids and let him watch an episode of Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood. And around 7:30, he said he was hungry. So I went into the kitchen and got him a juice box and a pouch of applesauce. While he was eating, I checked my phone and sent a text to my mom. ** me. Stead my phone. ** good. Text me when they get home. ** wall. I set my phone on the coffee table and sat back down on the couch. Michael finished his snack and climbed into my lap, which surprised me, but also felt like a good sign. He was comfortable with me. "Do you want to watch another show before bedtime?" I asked. He nodded. I let him watch one more episode, and then at 8:15, I told him it was time to get ready for bed. "Do you need to brush your teeth?" He nodded again. I followed him upstairs to the bathroom, which was small but clean. There was a step stool in front of the sink, and he climbed up on it and brushed his teeth with a little dinosaur toothbrush. I helped him rinse and then walked him to his bedroom. His room was at the top of the stairs, first door on the left, just like Mr. Henderson had said. It was small, with a twin bed, a dresser, and a bookshelf for the few picture books. There was a nightlight plugged into the wall that cast a soft glow across the room. "Which book do you want to read?" I asked. He walked over to the bookshelf and pulled out a book called Good Night, Construction Site. Good choice. I sat on the edge of his bed and read the book to him. He lay there quietly listening, his eyes starting to droop. By the time I finished, he was barely awake. "Good night, Michael," I whispered. "Night," he mumbled. I stood up, turned off the overhead light, and left the door cracked open slightly so I could hear him if he woke up. Downstairs, the house was quiet. I checked my phone. It was 8:45 p.m. Mr. and Mrs. Henderson wouldn't be back for at least another 2 hours, maybe more. I sat down on the couch and opened Instagram, scrolling mindlessly through photos of people from school. Someone had posted a picture from a party I hadn't been invited to, which stung a little, but I tried not to think about it. I was just about to pull up Netflix when my phone buzzed. It was a call from a number I didn't recognize. Not the same number Mr. Henderson had called me from yesterday, but another local number. I hesitated for a second, then answered. "Hello? Hi. Is this the babysitter at 428 Elmwood Drive?" The voice was female. Older, maybe in her 50s or 60s. She sounded stressed. Frantic even. "Yes. Who hired you?" The question caught me completely off guard. "I'm sorry. What? Who hired you to babysit? What's their name?" My heart started beating a little faster. Something about her tone made my stomach tighten. "Mr. and Mrs. Henderson. Why?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. A long, horrible pause. Then the woman spoke again, and her voice was shaking. "We're the Hendersons. We own that house. We're in Florida right now on vacation. We didn't hire anyone. Who are you? And why are you in my house?" My entire body went cold. "What? We didn't hire a babysitter. We don't even have a babysitter's number. Our son is with us in Florida. Whoever told you they were us? They're not. You need to get out of that house right now." I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. My brain was trying to process what she was saying, but it felt impossible. I don't understand. Mr. Henderson called me. He gave me this address. I met him and his wife. There's a little boy upstairs. We don't have a little boy. We have a daughter, and she's 12, and she's here with us. Oh my God. Oh my God. "You need to call the police," the woman said, her voice rising, "and you need to get out of that house immediately. Do you understand me?" Yes. Okay. I'm calling 911 right now. Get out, now." The call ended. I sat there on the couch, staring at my phone, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped it. This wasn't their house. The man who hired me wasn't Mr. Henderson. The little boy upstairs. I stood up so fast I almost tripped over the coffee table. My mind was racing. I needed to get out. I needed to grab Michael and get out. But who was he? Whose child was upstairs? I ran to the bottom of the stairs and looked up toward his bedroom. The door was still cracked open, just like I'd left it. I needed to get him and leave. Now, I started up the stairs, my legs trembling, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. But then I froze, because I heard something. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway. I stood frozen on the third step, my hand gripping the railing so hard my knuckles turned white. A car door slammed outside. My brain was screaming at me to move, to run, to do something, but my body wouldn't respond. I was stuck in that horrible space between panic and paralysis where everything moves too fast and too slow at the same time. Footsteps on the front walkway. Heavy, deliberate. He was back. The man who had called himself David Henderson was back, and I was standing in the middle of someone else's house with a child upstairs who wasn't his son. I forced myself to move. I turned and ran back down the stairs as quietly as I could, my socks sliding slightly on the hardwood floor. I needed to think. I needed a plan. The front door was right there. I could see it from where I stood in the living room, 20 feet away. Unlocked, probably. I could run. I could get out right now, but Michael was upstairs. I couldn't leave him. Even if I didn't understand who he was or why he was here, I couldn't leave a 3-year-old alone in this house, with whoever was about to walk through that door. I heard the jingle of keys outside. My heart dropped into my stomach. I ran into the kitchen and pressed myself against the wall next to the refrigerator, out of sight from the front door. My phone was still in my hand, and I looked down at the screen with shaking fingers. I opened the phone app and dialed 911. The line rang once. Twice, the front door opened. Sarah? His voice. The same friendly, professional tone from yesterday on the phone. The same voice that had thanked me for coming, that had told me where the snacks were, that had said his wife was finishing getting ready upstairs. Sarah, we're back early. Show got cancelled. Some technical issue. I pressed the phone to my ear, my other hand clamped over my mouth, to keep myself from making a sound. The 911 operator answered. 911, what's your emergency? I whispered, barely audible. I need help. I'm at 428 Elmwood Drive. There's a man, Sarah? His voice was closer now. He was walking through the house. Where are you? The operator's voice came through. Ma'am, can you speak up? I'm having trouble hearing you. I couldn't. If I spoke any louder, he would hear me. Please, I whispered. Send someone. 428 Elmwood Drive. Please. Ma'am, are you in danger? Can you stay on the line? Footsteps in the living room now. Sarah, it's okay. I just need to talk to you for a second. His tone was still calm, still friendly, but there was something underneath it now, something that made my skin crawl. I stayed pressed against the wall, phone to my ear, trying not to breathe too loud. We got a call, he said, from the real owners of this house. I'm guessing you did too. He knew that I knew. Listen, Sarah, I'm not going to hurt you. I just need you to stay calm, okay? This is all a big misunderstanding. Let's just talk about it. The operator was still on the line. Ma'am, officers are en route to your location. Can you tell me who's in the house with you? I couldn't answer. I couldn't move. Sarah, I know you're scared, but I promise you, if you just come out and talk to me, we can figure this out. I'm not a bad guy. This is just complicated. His footsteps moved toward the kitchen. I looked around frantically. There was a door to my right. The door to the garage that Mr. Henderson had shown me earlier. I didn't know if it was locked. I had maybe 5 seconds before he walked into the kitchen and saw me. I shoved my phone into my pocket, the 911 operator still on the line, and I lunged for the garage door. My hand closed around the doorknob. It turned. I yanked the door open and stumbled into the dark garage, pulling the door shut behind me as quietly as I could. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it might explode. The garage was pitch black. I couldn't see anything. I felt along the wall for a light switch, but couldn't find one. Behind me, through the door, I heard him enter the kitchen. Sarah? His voice was right there, right on the other side of the door. I backed away from the door, my hands stretched out in front of me, trying not to knock into anything. My foot hit something, a box maybe, and I froze. Please don't let him open the door, please. I heard him move around the kitchen, opening cabinets, closing them. I know you're scared, he said, his voice muffled now. "But you don't need to be. I'm not going to hurt you. I just need you to listen to me." I took another step backward, and my back hit something cold and metal. The car. There was a car in the garage, the SUV. An idea flashed through my mind. If I could get into the car, maybe I could lock myself inside. Maybe I could wait there until the police arrived. But I didn't have keys, and even if I did, the garage door was closed. I'd seen it from the outside when my mom dropped me off. There was no way out except back through the kitchen. I was trapped. "Sarah, I'm going to be honest with you. The police are probably on their way. You called them, didn't you?" I didn't answer. I stayed completely still in the darkness, my back pressed against the cold metal of the SUV. "That's fine. That's smart, actually. But here's the thing. When they get here, they're going to ask a lot of questions. And I think it's better if we get our story straight first. Our story straight. Like this was something we were in together." "I'm not trying to scare you, Sarah. I'm really not. But you need to understand something. That little boy upstairs, he's not in danger. He's not hurt. He's safe. And he's going to stay safe as long as you don't do anything stupid." My blood ran cold. He was threatening Michael. "So here's what we're going to do. You're going to come out, and we're going to sit down, and we're going to wait for the police together. And when they get here, you're going to tell them that everything is fine, that I'm a family friend, that you got confused. Do you understand?" I pulled my phone out of my pocket. The screen was still lit up. The 911 call was still connected. I brought it to my ear and whispered as quietly as I possibly could. "He's threatening me. There's a child upstairs. Please hurry." The operator responded immediately. "Officers are 2 minutes away. Stay on the line. Do not hang up." 2 minutes. I could hear him moving again in the kitchen, opening drawers, looking for something. Then the sound stopped. Silence. I held my breath, and then the garage door handle started to turn. Oh God, no. The door opened, and light flooded into the garage from the kitchen. I squinted against the brightness, and I saw him standing in the doorway. He looked different now. His face wasn't friendly anymore. It was hard, cold. He was holding something in his right hand. A kitchen knife. "Sarah," he said quietly, "come back inside." I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I just stood there, staring at him, at the knife, at the terrible calm expression on his face. "I didn't want to do this," he said, "but you're making this very difficult." Somewhere in the distance I heard sirens, faint, but getting louder. The expression changed. Just for a second. A flicker of something. Panic, maybe. Anger. He looked back toward the front of the house, then back at me. "You stupid kid." He took a step toward me. I screamed. I screamed as loud as I could, and I ran. Not toward the kitchen door. I couldn't get past him. Instead, I ran toward the far corner of the garage, where I'd seen a small window near the ceiling when the light came on. There were boxes stacked along the wall. I didn't think. I just climbed. I heard him behind me, his footsteps fast, heavy. "Get down from there." I scrambled up the boxes, my hands slipping, my knees slamming into something hard. Pain shot through my leg, but I didn't stop. I reached the window and shoved it open with both hands. It was small, maybe 2 feet wide. But I didn't care. I squeezed through, my shoulders scraping against the frame, my body half in and half out. Behind me, I felt his hand grab my ankle. I screamed again and kicked as hard as I could. My foot connected with something, his face, maybe, and his grip loosened just enough. I pulled myself through the window and fell. I hit the ground outside hard. The wind knocked out of me. For a second, I just lay there on the cold grass, gasping, my vision swimming, but I could still hear the sirens. They were close now. So close. I forced myself to stand, my legs shaking, and I ran toward the street. The flashing red and blue lights were turning onto Elmwood Drive. I ran into the middle of the road, waving my arms, shouting, "Help, please, help." 2 police cars screeched to a stop in front of me. An officer jumped out, his hand on his gun. "Are you Sarah?" I nodded, barely able to get the words out. "He's inside. He has a knife. There's a little boy upstairs." "How many people inside?" "Just him, and the boy. The boy's name is Michael. He's 3. He's asleep upstairs." The officer spoke into his radio, quick and clipped. Suspect inside with a knife. One juvenile hostage, 3 years old, upstairs, requesting backup. Another officer approached me. Were you hurt? I looked down at myself. My jeans were torn at the knee and there was blood. My hands were scraped, but I was alive. I'm okay. Come with me. We need to get you away from the house. She led me to the police car and opened the back door. Sit here for a second, okay? Don't move. I sat down, my whole body trembling. More police cars arrived, then an ambulance. The quiet suburban street was suddenly flooded with lights and noise, and people in uniforms moving with purpose. I watched as officers surrounded the house, their guns drawn. One of them shouted through a megaphone, "This is the police. Come out with your hands up." I don't know how long I sat there. It felt like hours, but it was probably only minutes. Finally, the front door opened. He walked out slowly, his hands raised above his head. 2 officers rushed forward, grabbed him, and forced him to the ground. They handcuffed him and pulled him to his feet. As they led him past the police car where I was sitting, he turned his head and looked right at me. His expression was blank, empty, and then he smiled, just a little. I felt like I was going to throw up. An officer opened the car door. "Sarah, we got the little boy. He's safe. He's not hurt." Relief flooded through me, but it was mixed with something else. Confusion, fear. "Who is he?" I asked. "Whose kid is he?" The officer's expression was grim. "We're still figuring that out." They brought Michael out a few minutes later. He was awake now, crying and confused. A female officer was carrying him, speaking to him softly, trying to calm him down. When he saw me, he reached out. "Sarah." The officer brought him over. "Do you know her?" He nodded, still crying. "Sarah." She looked at me. "Can you hold him for a second? Just until we figure out what's going on." I nodded, and she handed him to me. He wrapped his arms around my neck and buried his face in my shoulder, and I held him tight, my own tears finally starting to fall. "It's okay," I whispered. "You're okay." But I didn't know if that was true. They took me to the police station after that. My parents met me there. My mom was hysterical, crying and hugging me so hard I could barely breathe. My dad just kept asking if I was hurt, his voice shaking. I told them everything: the phone call, the house, the woman who called me and said she was the real Mrs. Henderson, the man coming back, the garage, the window. A detective named Rivera sat across from me in a small interview room and asked me to go through it all again, slower this time, with more details. "Do you remember anything specific about the man who called himself David Henderson? Any scars, tattoos, accent?" I shook my head. He just looked normal, like a dad. "What about the car, the silver SUV in the driveway? Did you notice the license plate?" "No, I'm sorry." "That's okay. You did everything right, Sarah. You called 911. You got yourself out. You saved that little boy." "Whose kid is he?" I asked again. "Where did he come from?" Detective Rivera hesitated. "We're still working on that." But I could see it in her face. She knew something. She just wasn't telling me yet. It wasn't until 2 days later that I found out the truth. Detective Rivera called my parents and asked if she could come by the house to talk to me again. We sat in the living room. Me, my mom, my dad, and the detective. "We identified the man," she said. "His real name is Eric Dalton. He's 38 years old. He has a record. Fraud, mostly. Identity theft. He's been on our radar for a while, but we could never pin anything solid on him." "What about Michael?" I asked. "Whose kid is he?" Rivera's expression softened. "His name isn't Michael. It's actually Ethan. His mother reported him missing 3 weeks ago from a town about 2 hours from here. She's a single mom, works 2 jobs. She left him with a babysitter one night, and when she came home, the babysitter said a man claiming to be the child's uncle had picked him up early." My stomach turned. "He kidnapped him." "Yes, but why?" Rivera sighed. "We think he was using the child to gain access to homes. He would pose as a parent, hire a babysitter, and while the babysitter was distracted with the child, he would case the house, learn the layout, figure out what was valuable. Then he'd come back later when the real owners weren't home." "But the house was empty," I said. "The real Hendersons were in Florida." "Exactly. He knew that. He'd been watching the house for weeks, waiting for them to leave. He hired you to make it look legitimate. If anyone saw a babysitter there, they'd assume the owners were home. I felt sick, so I was part of his plan. You were a cover, but you weren't part of it. You didn't do anything wrong. What's going to happen to him? He's being charged with kidnapping, fraud, breaking and entering, and a few other things. He's not getting out anytime soon. And Ethan, he's back with his mother. He's safe. I nodded, but I didn't feel relieved. I just felt hollow. The weeks after that were strange. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face. That blank, empty expression. That smile. I stopped babysitting. I deleted my flyer from the library. I didn't answer my phone unless I recognized the number. At school, people found out what happened. Some kids treated me like I was a hero. Others looked at me like I was fragile, like I might break if they said the wrong thing. I hated both. I just wanted to forget, but I couldn't. A few months later, Detective Rivera called again. "I wanted to let you know," she said. "We found evidence linking Eric Dalton to at least 4 other incidents in different states. Same pattern. He'd kidnap a child, pose as a parent, hire a babysitter, and use them as cover to scout homes. You weren't the first. Did he hurt anyone?" "Not physically, but a lot of families had their homes burglarized, and a lot of babysitters were left traumatized." "What about the other kids? The ones he took?" "They were all returned safely, but it's going to take a long time for them to recover." I didn't know what to say. "I also wanted to tell you something else," Rivera continued. "The mother of the little boy, Ethan, she asked if she could meet you, to thank you." I thought about it for a long time, and eventually I said yes. We met at a coffee shop a few weeks later. She was younger than I expected, maybe late 20s. She had dark circles under her eyes, and looked like she hadn't slept in weeks. Ethan was with her. He looked different now, cleaner, happier. He didn't recognize me at first, but when his mom pointed me out, he smiled. "That's Sarah," she said. "She's the one who kept you safe." He walked over to me shyly and held out a drawing. It was a crayon picture of 2 stick figures holding hands. "That's you and me," he said. I felt my throat tighten. "Thank you, Ethan." His mom's eyes were full of tears. "I don't know how to thank you. If you hadn't been there, if you hadn't called the police, I'm just glad he's okay." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You saved my son." I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like a kid who got lucky. But I nodded. "I'm glad I could help. I'm 28 now. It's been 12 years since that night. I never babysat again. I went to college, got a degree, started a career, built a life that doesn't involve walking into strangers' houses and trusting that they are who they say they are. But I still think about it. I think about how easily it could have gone differently, how close I came to not making it out. I think about Ethan, and I wonder if he remembers, if he has nightmares, if his mom still watches him like a hawk, terrified that someone will take him again. And I think about Eric Dalton, the man who smiled at me as they dragged him away in handcuffs. He's in prison now. He'll be there for a long time. But sometimes late at night, I still see his face. And I wonder how many others like him are out there, waiting for the next Sarah to answer the phone. I need to back up a little bit, because there are parts of this story I didn't understand until much later. Parts that the police uncovered during their investigation that I only learned about when Detective Rivera sat me down months after everything happened and walked me through the full picture. It turns out that what happened to me wasn't random. It wasn't even the worst of what Eric Dalton had done. The first thing they figured out was how he got my number. It wasn't from the library flyer. That was a lie. Detective Rivera showed me a file about 3 months after the incident. We were sitting in the same interview room at the station where I'd first told my story. She slid a folder across the table toward me. "I wanted you to see this," she said. "I think you deserve to know the full scope of what you walked into." I opened the folder. Inside were printouts, screenshots, photos. The first page was a screenshot of a Facebook group called Oakmont Community Parents. My stomach dropped. "He was in this group," Rivera explained, "under a fake name. He'd been active in it for months before he contacted you, asking questions. Where do people find babysitters? Who do you trust with your kids? Are there any teenagers in the area looking for work?" I scrolled through the screenshots. There were dozens of posts, parents responding with recommendations. Some of them had even tagged their teenage daughters or neighbors. One of the posts had my name in it. A woman I vaguely recognized, someone's mom from church, had commented, "Sarah M. is fantastic. super responsible. My friend used her a few times. I think she posted a flyer at the library. My hand started shaking. He didn't find you at the library, Rivera said quietly. He found you on Facebook. Through that group, he saw your name, tracked down your information, and called you directly. How did he get my number? Their flyer at the library had your first name and number on tear-off tabs, but he didn't need the flyer. Once he had your first name and knew you were local, it wasn't hard. Phone directories, reverse searches. He had time. He was patient. I felt sick, so he targeted me. He targeted a lot of people, Sarah. You were just one of many. She flipped to the next page in the folder. It was a photo of a different girl, maybe 16 or 17, blonde hair, smiling in what looked like a school photo. Her name is Emily. She was a babysitter in the town about 90 miles from here. 2 months before your incident, she got a call from a man who said his name was Robert Klein. He hired her to watch his daughter. Same setup, nice house, friendly parents. Except the parents weren't real, and the little girl wasn't his daughter. What happened to her? She got lucky. The real homeowners came back early from a trip. They walked in and found her there with a child they'd never seen before. They called the police. By the time officers arrived, Dalton was gone. He took the child with him. I stared at the photo. Did they find the kid? A week later. Dropped off at a gas station. 2 states away, unharmed, but scared out of her mind. Rivera flipped to another page. Another girl, another story, and another. And another. By the time I reached the end of the folder, there were 7 girls total. 7 babysitters in 5 different states. All of them hired by a man who didn't exist. All of them sent to houses that weren't his. And all of them used as cover while he scouted homes, gathered information, and planned burglaries. You were number 8, Rivera said. I closed the folder. I couldn't look at it anymore. Why kids? I asked. Why did he take kids and pretend they were his? Rivera leaned back in her chair. Because it worked. A man alone in a big empty house looks suspicious. But a man with a child and a babysitter, that looks normal. It looks safe. Neighbors don't call the police when they see a babysitter's car in the driveway. They assume everything is fine. But where did he get the kids? That was the question that haunted me the most. Rivera's expression darkened. That's the part that's still under investigation. We know he took Ethan, the boy you knew as Michael, from his mother's apartment. But the others? We're not sure. Some of them were from daycare centers. One was taken from a park, another from a grocery store, parking lot. He just grabbed them. He was careful. He watched families for weeks, learned their routines, waited for the right moment, and then he'd approach the child, usually when the parent was distracted, and tell them their mom or dad sent him to pick them up. Most of the kids were young enough that they didn't question it. I felt a wave of nausea roll through me. How long did he keep them? Anywhere from a few days to a few weeks. He'd move them around, keep them in different locations, hotels mostly, sometimes rental properties. He'd buy them food, let them watch TV, keep them calm, and then when he was done using them for whatever job he was planning, he'd drop them off somewhere public and disappear. He didn't hurt them, not physically, but psychologically. Yeah, these kids are going to carry this with them for the rest of their lives. I thought about Ethan, the way he'd clung to me in the back of the police car, the way he'd cried when they took him away. What about his parents? I asked. The fake parents, the woman who came downstairs and said she was Jennifer Henderson. Was she real? Rivera shook her head. That was an accomplice. A woman named Monica Pryor. She's 34. She has a record too, mostly petty theft and drug charges. We think Dalton paid her to play the role of the wife, make everything look more legitimate. Where is she now? In custody. She's cooperating with the investigation. Gave us a lot of information about how Dalton operated. What did she say? Rivera pulled out another document. According to Pryor, Dalton had been running this scheme for at least 3 years, maybe longer. He'd identify vacant homes, places where the owners were on vacation or away for work, and he'd stage these fake babysitting jobs. Sometimes he'd steal things from the house. Other times he'd just gather information and sell it to other criminals. Names, addresses, security systems, valuables. He had a whole network, and nobody caught him. He was smart. He never stayed in one place long enough. He'd do a job, move to a new town, change his name, and start over. By the time anyone realized what had happened, He was gone. I leaned back in my chair, trying to process it all. How did he get caught this time? You, Rivera said simply. You called 911. You didn't panic and run. You stayed calm enough to get help. And because you did, we were able to catch him before he disappeared again. I didn't feel like I'd done anything heroic. I felt like I'd barely survived. There was one more thing I needed to know. The house, I said. 428 Elmwood Drive. How did he know the owners were going to be gone? Rivera smiled grimly. That's the part that's going to make you paranoid for the rest of your life. What do you mean? The Andersons, the real ones, posted about their vacation on Facebook. Public post. Photos of them at the airport with their daughter. Caption said something like Florida. Here we come. 2 weeks of sunshine. They even tagged the dates. My blood ran cold. He saw the post, Rivera continued. He knew exactly when they'd be gone, and for how long. All he had to do was show up, pretend to be them, and hire a babysitter to make it look like someone was home. But how did he get inside? Broke in through the back door. It's an older lock. Took him maybe 30 seconds. Once he was inside, he staged the whole thing. Put out some toys for the kid. Made it look lived in, and then he called you. I felt a chill run down my spine. All of it had been planned. Every detail, every word he'd said on the phone, every smile, every reassurance. It had all been a lie. They asked me to testify at his trial. I said no at first. I didn't want to see him again. I didn't want to sit in a courtroom and relive the worst night of my life while he stared at me from across the room. But my mom convinced me. He needs to be held accountable, she said. And the only way that happens is if people like you stand up and tell the truth. So I did. The trial was in the fall, about 8 months after the incident. I wore a dress my mom picked out, and sat in the witness box with my hands folded in my lap, trying not to shake. Eric Dalton sat at the defense table in a suit and tie, looking nothing like the man who had chased me through a garage with a knife. He looked clean, professional, almost respectable, but when he looked at me, I saw it. That same empty expression, that same cold calculation. The prosecutor asked me to walk through the night step by step. I did. I told them about the phone call, the house. The moment I realized something was wrong, the 911 call, the garage, the window. When I was finished, the defense attorney stood up. He was older, gray-haired, with a calm, measured voice. Miss Sarah, he said, you said that when you arrived at the house, everything seemed normal. Is that correct? Yes. The man who hired you was polite, friendly. He showed you around the house, introduced you to the child, gave you emergency contact information. All of that seemed perfectly normal, didn't it? Yes, but... And when he left, you didn't feel unsafe. You didn't call your mother and ask to be picked up. You stayed. You played with the child. You put him to bed. Everything was fine until you received that phone call from Mrs. Henderson, correct? Yes. So it's fair to say that up until that moment you had no reason to believe anything was wrong. I hesitated, I guess. And when my client returned to the house, he didn't immediately threaten you, did he? He had a knife. But he didn't brandish it when he first walked in. He called out to you. He said he wanted to talk. Isn't that right? Yes. But and you ran, you hid. You refused to speak to him, so he had no opportunity to explain the situation. I stared at him. Explain the situation? My client maintains that this was all a misunderstanding, that he had permission to be in that home, that the child was a prosecutor stood up. Objection. The defendant has been charged with kidnapping and breaking and entering. There is no misunderstanding. Sustained, the judge said. The defense attorney sat down, looking satisfied. I wanted to scream. Eric Dalton was convicted on all counts. Kidnapping, burglary, fraud, assault with a deadly weapon. The judge sentenced him to 18 years in prison. When they read the sentence, he didn't react. He just sat there, staring straight ahead. But as they led him out of the courtroom, he turned and looked at me one last time. And he smiled. That same smile, empty smile. I thought that would be the end of it. I thought I could move on. Go to college. Start over. But 3 years later, I got a letter. It came in a plain white envelope with a return address I didn't recognize. No name, just a P.O. box number, from a town 2 states away. I opened it. Inside was a single piece of notebook paper, folded in half. The handwriting was neat, careful. It said, Sarah, I've been thinking about you a lot. I hope you're doing well. I hope you've been able to move past what happened. I know it was scary for you. I want you to know that I never meant to hurt you. I'm not a violent person. I just made some bad choices. I'm paying for those now. I also want you to know that I forgive you. I know you were scared. I know you didn't understand what was happening. That the things you said in court, the way you made me look, that hurt. It hurt a lot. I hope one day you'll understand that I'm not the monster they made me out to be. Take care. You read it 3 times. And then I threw up. I showed the letter to Detective Rivero. She traced it back to a woman named Linda Pryor, Monica Pryor's sister. Monica had been released after serving a reduced sentence in exchange for her testimony against Dalton. Apparently, she'd stayed in contact with him. The letter had been written by Dalton in prison and smuggled out through Linda, who mailed it on his behalf. He's not supposed to contact you, Rivera said. This violates the restraining order. We can press charges. Will it do anything? She sighed. Probably not. He's already serving 18 years. Then forget it. I didn't want to think about him anymore. I didn't want to give him any more of my life. But the letter stayed with me. Not because of what it said, but because of what it meant. He was still thinking about me. Even locked away in a cell, thousands of miles from where I lived, he was still thinking about me. And that terrified me more than anything else. I'm 28 now. I don't babysit. I don't answer calls from numbers. I don't recognize. I don't post anything personal on social media. I check the locks on my doors 3 times before I go to bed. I don't go into strangers' homes. And I never, ever trust someone just because they sound nice on the phone. Because I learned something that night. Monsters don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they look like a dad in khakis and glasses. Sometimes they sound polite and professional and trustworthy. Sometimes they smile at you while they're planning something terrible. And sometimes, even when they're caught and mocked away, they don't stop. They don't stop thinking about you. They don't stop smiling. There's something I didn't mention earlier, something I only found out about years later, long after the trial was over, and I thought I'd moved on. It happened when I was 22, finishing up my senior year of college. I was working on a research paper for a criminal psychology class. The assignment was to choose a case, any case, and analyze the psychological profile of the offender. I chose a random case from a database of unsolved crimes. A string of home invasions in the Midwest from 2009 to 2012. No arrests, no suspects, just a pattern of break-ins where the thief seemed to know exactly when families would be out of town. I was 3 pages into my research when I saw it. One of the incident reports mentioned a detail that made my blood run cold. Witnesses reported seeing a man with a young child entering the residence 2 days prior to the burglary. The man claimed to be Houses, sitting for the owners. My hands froze on the keyboard. I clicked on the attached files, police reports, photos, witness statements. And then I saw a sketch. It wasn't a perfect match. The nose was slightly different. The jawline was a little softer, but the eyes were the same. Eric Dalton, or someone who looked just like him. I kept digging. I found another case, then another, then another. All of them followed the same pattern. A man with a child, a babysitter, an empty house. All of them years before my incident. Some of them went back as far as 2008. I'd be doing this for over a decade. I reached out to Detective Rivero. I hadn't spoken to her in almost 4 years, but I still had her number saved in my phone. She answered on the second ring. Sarah? Hi. I'm sorry to bother you. I know it's been a while. It's okay. What's going on? I told her what I'd found. The cases, the pattern, the sketch. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. We knew, she said finally. What? We knew there were other cases. Older ones. We just couldn't prove they were all him. Why didn't you tell me? Because you were 14, Sarah. You were traumatized. We didn't want to make it worse by telling you that the man who almost killed you had been doing this for years. I felt a surge of anger. I deserved to know. You're right. You did. I'm sorry. I took a deep breath, trying to calm down. How many cases? We're not sure. At least 20. Maybe more. He used different names. Different accomplices. He moved around a lot. It's hard to track. And the kids? How many kids did he take? Another silence. We don't know. That answer was worse than anything else she could have said. I spent the next 6 months obsessing over it. I joined online forums, true crime groups, missing persons databases. I started looking for patterns, and I found them. Between 2007 and 2016, there were at least 38 cases of children being temporarily abducted and then released unharmed in public places. Most of them were under the age of 5. Most of them couldn't give clear descriptions of their abductor. But when I cross-referenced the locations and dates with unsolved burglaries in the same areas, the overlap was undeniable. I compiled everything into a document. Over 60 pages, maps, timelines, case summaries. And I sent it to Detective Rivera. She called me 2 days later. "Sarah, this is incredible. Seriously. I don't know how you put all of this together." "Is it him?" "I think so. We're going to follow up on it. See if we can link any of these cases directly to Dalton." "What happens if you can?" "Then he's looking at a lot more charges. A lot more time." Good, I thought. He should never get out. But the more I learned, the worse it got. Because it wasn't just burglaries. In 2011, a 4-year-old girl named Emma Tate was reported missing from a shopping mall in Ohio. She was found 3 days later, wandering alone in a park 50 miles away. She couldn't explain where she'd been or who had taken her. She just kept saying, "The nice man." In 2013, a 6-year-old boy named Lucas Reed disappeared from a daycare center in Indiana. He was found 2 weeks later at a bus station in Kentucky. He told police a man had picked him up and said his mom was in the hospital. The man bought him food, let him watch cartoons, and then left him at the bus station with a note pinned to his shirt that said, "Please call his mother." In 2015, a 3-year-old girl named Sophie Martin was taken from her front yard in Pennsylvania. She was found 4 days later at a rest stop in Virginia. She was unharmed, but couldn't describe the person who had taken her. All of them fit the pattern. All of them happened in areas where unsolved burglaries were reported within days of the children being found. And in at least 3 of those cases, witnesses reported seeing a man with a child and a teenage babysitter in a home that was supposed to be empty. I showed my findings to a journalist. Her name was Rachel Cormier, and she wrote for a mid-sized paper in Pittsburgh. She covered my case back in 2016 and had reached out to me a few times over the years, asking for follow-up interviews. I'd always said no, but this time I said yes. We met at a coffee shop near my college campus. I brought my laptop and walked her through everything. She listened without interrupting, her expression growing darker with every case I showed her. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and exhaled slowly. "This is huge, Sarah. I know, if even half of this is true, this guy is responsible for dozens of kidnappings. Maybe more. That's why I need you to write about it. People need to know." She nodded. "I'll do it, but I need to warn you. Once this goes public, your name is going to be attached to it. People are going to want to talk to you, interview you. You're going to lose your anonymity." I thought about it for a long time, and then I said, "I don't care. This is bigger than me." The article came out 3 months later. It was titled, "The Babysitter Scheme: How One Man Used Children and Teenage Girls to Commit Dozens of Crimes Across Multiple States." It was published online and picked up by several major news outlets within hours. By the end of the day, it had over 1 million views. My phone didn't stop ringing for weeks. News stations wanted interviews. Podcasts wanted me as a guest. Victims' families reached out, asking if I thought their cases were connected. It was overwhelming, but it was also validating, because for the first time, people were paying attention. The article led to a renewed investigation. The FBI got involved. They reopened at least 15 cold cases and started looking for connections to Eric Dalton. Within 6 months, they've linked him to 12 additional kidnappings and over 20 burglaries. New charges were filed. His sentence was extended. He's never getting out now. But here's the thing that still keeps me up at night. Even with all the cases we found, we know there are more. We know there are children out there who were taken and returned and never reported it because they were too young to understand what happened. We know there are families who were burglarized and never connected it to a man with a child and a babysitter. We know there are babysitters like me who walked into situations they didn't understand and got out by sheer luck. And we know Eric Dalton didn't work alone. Monica Pryor was arrested, but she wasn't the only accomplice. There were others. The FBI found evidence of at least 3 other women who played the role of the wife in different cities. None of them have been identified. There were men too, people who helped him scout homes, who provided him with information, who bought stolen goods. Some of them are still out there. 2 years ago, I got another letter. This one wasn't from Eric Dalton. It was from a woman named Angela. She didn't give me her last name, just Angela. The letter said, "Sarah, I read the article about you. I wanted to reach out because I think I was one of the babysitters. It happened in 2014. I was 16. A man called me and said he needed someone to watch his daughter. I showed up at the house and everything seemed normal. But halfway through the night, I got a weird feeling. Something was off. I can't explain it. I just knew something was wrong. I grabbed the little girl and left. I called my mom to pick me up. We called the police, but by the time they got there, the man was gone. The little girl's parents showed up an hour later. They said they'd been on vacation. They had no idea who the man was or where their daughter had been. I never found out what happened. But after reading your story, I think it was him. I just wanted to say thank you for speaking up, for making people pay attention. I don't think I ever would have understood what happened to me if I hadn't read your article. Angela, I cried when I read it, because I realized something. I wasn't alone. There were others like me. Girls who had walked into the same traps. Girls who had trusted a voice on the phone and ended up in a nightmare. Some of them got out. Some of them didn't. I still get letters sometimes. From other babysitters. From parents whose children were taken. From detectives working cold cases who think they've found another connection. I try to respond to all of them, because I know what it's like to feel alone in this, to feel like no one understands. And I know what it's like to need someone to tell you that it wasn't your fault, that you did everything right, that you survived. Last year I started a blog. It's called The Babysitter Files. I share stories, not just mine, but others. Stories from girls who were hired by men who didn't exist. Stories from parents whose children were taken. Stories from detectives trying to piece together patterns that no one else sees. It's not a big platform, maybe a few thousand followers, but it's something. And every time someone reaches out and says, "I think this happened to me too," I know it's worth it. I'm 28 now. I have a job I love, I have friends, I have a life, but I also have this weight, this responsibility. Because I know something that most people don't. I know that monsters are real. I know that they're patient. I know that they're smart. And I know that they're still out there. Eric Dalton is in prison. But he's not the only one. There are others. People who use children as tools. Who manipulate young girls into walking into danger. Who hide behind friendly voices and polite smiles. And the scariest part, most of them never get caught. So if you're reading this, and you're a babysitter, or a parent, or someone who hires babysitters, I need you to listen. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Don't ignore red flags just because someone sounds nice. Don't assume that because a situation looks normal, it is normal. And if you ever find yourself in a house that doesn't feel right, get out. Call someone. Call 911. Pull your parents. Just get out, because I got lucky. I had a phone. I had a window. I had police who arrived in time, but not everyone does. A few months ago, I got an email from Ethan's mom. She told me that Ethan is 12 now. He's doing well. He plays soccer. He's on the honor roll. He doesn't talk about what happened anymore. But sometimes, she said, he has nightmares. And when he wakes up, he asks for me. He asks if Sarah is okay. She wanted to know if I'd be willing to meet him again. Just for coffee. Just so he could see that I'm okay. I said yes. We met last month. He's so much taller now. So much older. He looks nothing like the 3-year-old I held in the back of a police car 12 years ago. But when he saw me, he smiled. And he said, "Hi, Sarah." And I realized something. We're connected. Not by choice, not by anything we did, but by survival. We both walked into something terrible, and we both made it out. And that matters. So yeah, that's my story. It's not a neat story. It doesn't have a clean ending. Eric Dalton is in prison, but he'll probably die there still thinking about the girls he manipulated. Still thinking about the children he stole. Still thinking he did nothing wrong. The other accomplices are still out there. The families are still healing. And I'm still here, trying to make sense of it all. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Some stories don't end. They just keep going. And all you can do is survive them. And maybe, if you're lucky, help someone else survive too, So if you're a teenager looking to make some extra money babysitting, please be careful. Ask questions. Meet the family before you agree to the job. Tell your parents where you're going. Trust your gut. And if something feels off, even a little bit, don't ignore it, because the monsters are real, and they're counting on you to ignore the signs. Don't let them win. I think about that night a lot. I think about the moment I heard the car pull into the driveway. I think about the moment I realized I was trapped. I think about the knife in his hand, and I think about the moment I decided I wasn't going to die. That moment changed everything, because I could have. It was from a girl named Melissa. She's 15. She said, "I almost took a babysitting job last week. A man called me and said he needed someone to watch his son, but something felt off. I didn't know why. I just had this feeling. I read your blog and I remembered your story. So I said no. I don't know if that man was dangerous. I don't know if I avoided something terrible, but I wanted to thank you because your story saved me." When I read that, I cried, because that's why I keep telling this story. That's why I keep talking about it, even when it hurts. Because if even one person listens, if even one person trusts their gut and walks away from danger, then it's worth it. I'm 28 years old, and I'm still that 14-year-old girl, climbing out of a window, running toward the flashing lights, screaming for help. I'll always be her. But I'm also something more. I'm a survivor. I'm a voice. I'm proof that you can walk into a nightmare and come out the other side. And I'm here to tell you, trust yourself, fight back, survive, because the monsters are real, but so are you, and you're stronger than you think. If you or someone you know has experienced something similar, please reach out. Talk to someone. Report it. Don't let it stay buried. Because the more we talk about this, the harder it is for people like Eric Dalton to... The more we share our stories, the safer we all become. So thank you for listening. Thank you for caring. And please, stay safe out there.